And I'll go ahead and introduce Coach Vanderbush. He's the strength and conditioning coach at Ben Davis High School. He's the chairman of the NSCA SIG for high school strength and conditioning coaches. He was, at this point that this was written, Coach, it said your 32nd year. Is that still correct, or was this a year old?
Right.
32nd
32.
year now, 32 as the strength and conditioning coach at Ben Davis High School in Indianapolis. He teaches an advanced weight training class that involves both strength training and athletic enhancement activities to athletes on all 20 boys and girls teams. He was named the National High School Strength Coach of the Year by American Football Monthly in 2008, the NSCA in 2007, and by the Professional Football Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society in 2001. He has had the opportunity to speak at the NSCA National or Coaches Conference 8 times. So, guys, without further ado, Coach Vanderbush, he is clearly somebody that we wanted to start with. He's a phenomenal professional and phenomenal person. He's got a passion for sharing. Like I said, he's willing to kind of stick around for most of his night, which just says something about his persona, his professionalism. Like Coach Rob said, he's absolutely the man. So, Coach, maybe if there's any intro, anything you want to say to the NSCA, anybody here, just off the bat. Maybe if I missed something about you, maybe if there's something that you want to share with all us coaches off, right from the front.
Well, I appreciate, John, you getting involved in this because as an executive council, we have been looking for ways to get out and communicate between the conferences. One of the frustrations has been that even at the conferences, we felt like there have not been enough high school talks, and we wanted to make sure that we had the ability for the strength coaches across the country to get together, learn from each other, ask questions, communicate, kind of open a dialogue that anybody that was associated would feel like they've got resources available. So, I appreciate that we've got this going on. I know we're going to work out, some kinks here with this first one, and that's fine. A good one to hit on in the beginning so that, you get these other guys in later. But I also want to make sure that I point out right from the beginning that if there's any question that's not answered, make sure you email me. My contact information is on the NSCA site, but I enjoy getting questions. In fact, when I get done speaking, if I'm not hounded, I feel like I haven't done a very good job. So, I want to share. I've been around 32 years, learned a lot, and feel like I've got a lot to get back.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate that input. The first question we'll go to is from Coach Girton. I think it's an easy transition. How did you get into the strength and conditioning field? Where did it start?
Well, as a high school athlete, I played baseball, basketball, football, but I also did some things on the side where I was the age group national champion in flatwater kayaking, which is not, well-known sport, which required that I get with people in the exercise science field, exercise physiologists and so forth, to learn about training methods. And once I got out of high school, I actually took a few years off throughout college to be on the U.S. national team for a while, where I got with Olympic development coaches, strength coaches, et cetera, and, just kind of developed a passion for training. In a lot of ways, I enjoyed that part of it as much as I did the competing. I liked figuring out, how to make people better, how to improve performance. And so it just kind of led into when I went back to college. At the time, it was called a physical education degree, but it was, what would be exercise science now. And, exercise physiology class, I was always the lab rat. I wanted to test things out, wanted to do it. So that got me excited about it. And then when I was fortunate, when I came out of college, just happened to be a school that was at the forefront of strength and conditioning, had a football coach who'd been at the college level that came in and said, we need a strength coach. And I was just right place, right time. So I was able to get a job right out of college.
Awesome, Coach. Now, I had a question that came from me, and this was something that I had thought up with you through. Guys, I want to share. Coach Vanderbush and I had spoken on Friday night, this previous Friday, and I kind of asked him, is there any information he wanted me to know or wanted me to share through this whole process or through our video, through our conference system? And he shared with me, Coach, what is it, 9 emails or so, right? I think it was eight emails. Yeah. I remember it going up to 8, and Coach just had such a wealth of information and such a willingness to share that helped me so much. So for me, this was the first question, and I got a lot out of those emails. So I wanted you, maybe it doesn't have to be as detailed as those emails, but just tell us a little bit about your system. your rep set scheme. I thought it was really cool. I think it's much different than most coaches do, or a lot of us coaches do. And I thought it seemed like a really, really cool approach. And obviously your experience and success has spoken for itself. So if you could just tell us a little bit about your system, the unified approach, and on those details.
When people hear me talk or they see my presentations, the typical response I get is that, wow, this is a lot more simple than I'm making it. And I'm big on the idea of not overcoaching. And when I developed my program, instead of coming up with a scheme that I loved the best, I looked at all my variables. I mean, I needed to be in a situation where, I've got 6 classes of advanced weight training. I've got males, females. I've got a number of different sports. I've got a lot of kids that I've got to get in at once. I had to be able to convince coaches that it was okay to lift on days of practice, days of competition. I was working with both in-season and out-of-season athletes. I had to have something that would fit within the room that I had, with the amount of equipment that I had. So there were a lot of different things that kind of went into me designing a program. And also, whereas most people, I think, are just looking at performance, injury prevention, so forth, I always also felt that there was something to be said for developing confidence, and that was a factor too. So whereas some people may not look at, changes in body composition as one of the goals, I felt like that was one of the things I wanted to see. I've had kids actually offered scholarships when coaches come in just because they look at the kid and say, boy, he's built like our kids are already, we're going to offer him. So I do think that's a factor, and I think it's a factor when the kids feel better about themselves. So what I came up with was an idea of a split routine where it's 2 days upper, 2 days lower. That allowed me to adjust, kids for in-season work to where I could make sure, my soccer team was lifting upper on game day, or my football team, the varsity was lifting upper on game day, and that type of thing. So that split works well for me. I also wanted to make sure that I had a day at least that I could work on athletic enhancement activities. Felt like it was important that I work on some basic things, not conditioning, but things that are going to develop footwork, explosive power, both upper and lower body, some core strength, some balance issues, some things that would allow me within a short period of time that I have with my kids to maybe work on some of these, people call them correctives or fixes and so forth. But I don't have enough time with 80 kids in a class to necessarily, individualize each kid's problems, but instead I work on all of the basic problems within my program. So, came up with the idea that within the period that I have, I've got about 35 minutes working time. So 5 stations, 7 minutes apiece, use a time clock. The time clock, I think, is one of the most valuable things I've got in there because it allows kids to see that, okay, I got to get 3 sets done in 7 minutes. So, you can kind of figure out the 1.5, 2 minute rest that I've got in between each set. And they're kind of forced to, run the thing themselves in some ways. But when the horn goes off, kids are moving to another station. Everything's mapped out ahead of time. I feel like structure is so important with anybody, but especially with high school athletes, to where when they walk in there, they know where they're supposed to go, when they're supposed to move, what they're supposed to do, and really even have to take, kind of some ownership themselves. My set rep scheme you posted, it's different than a lot because it's not quite as, it's not up and down, it's not undulating, it's not, conjugate, it's not, all these other things that people get, saying this is the quickest way to do it. But, I have found over the years that my kids are improving as much as anybody's I've seen. My kids are getting as strong as anybody, as fast as anybody. So for me to change and do something a little bit more complicated, to me, goes against what, some of my principles, but also against the idea that if it's working and you've got data that can show that, why go with something else just because you've learned more or seen other people use it? So, that's kind of a rambling there. You can ask more specific along the way, but hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of where I came up with, the concept.
Absolutely. Sure. So I've got one of the slides in front of me, and this is something that I can post up to the Facebook page, and this is something that I can email out, or Coach, I'm sure you'll be willing to share it. I see you've got, so your big 3 are squat, bench press, and power clean. Correct on that, right? And
yeah, those are the 3 that I'll test. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you've got, and then you'll go, of course, to your accessories. You'll have a week at 3 sets of 12 on your big 3 and your other lifts. 2 weeks at 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 10 on your other lifts. 2 weeks at 3 sets of 8 on your big three, 3 sets of 10 on your other lifts, 2 weeks at 3 sets of 6, 3 sets of 8 on your other lifts, and 2 weeks at 6, 4s, and 2s, and 3 sets of 8 on your other lifts. Is that correct? I'm reading this right? Now, can you go into just a little bit of detail of how that progresses? I know you I'm sure would love to share how the athletes determine and in certain aspects regulate what their load progression is, correct? So 3 sets of 10, if they don't hit their 3 sets of 10, they try again next week. If they do, they go up, right? I don't want to steal your shine. That's just something that I'd like you to explain.
Yeah, I have decided that, if I go in with a lot of different percentages and if I change things within each set, that my kids don't understand when they've gotten stronger, when they need to go up in weight. So I've come up with a system where, I can teach it to even, my lowest level thinking athlete, to where when we're doing 3 sets of 10, their target is to get all 3 sets of 10 with the same weight. Once they can get 3 sets of 10, then they know that they go up in weight. But typically, they'll get the first set of 10, maybe second set 8 or 9, third set 7 or 6, and then they're within the range that I'm asking them to be in. But by just having charts on the wall that, basically for sets of 12 at 70%, then for 10 at 75, 80, 85, and so forth, they get an idea of where they are, and they also get an idea of when we switch from 8s to 6s, what weight they've been using, in the 8s column. They just move over to the 6th column, and then they can figure out how much extra weight to add. So it's simple enough for them to take ownership where, they can say, okay, this is what I got last time. This is what I need to do this time, as opposed to me, working with all 400 athletes and putting a certain amount of weight down. And I also think it's important with a high school athlete that you take into consideration that, they're going to have good days and bad days. So for me to go with a heavy day, light day, and some of these other approaches, I may give the kid a heavy day on the day that he just flunked the test, broke up with his girlfriend, and had problems with his parents. And then I give him a light day on a day that he's feeling great. So I think it allows for adjusting to the high school athlete. That I'll find that they'll put a little bit more on when they feel good, and when they don't, they can still kind of figure out where to go with it. So it's not so strict, a concept that my kids are feeling like they're failing in any way, but they can see constant progress throughout the 9 weeks. And as a high school, we're working on 9 weeks, 4 9 weeks within the year. But within that 9 weeks, they, should be seeing a kind of a stair step along the chart where they're seeing constant improvement. I also think, though, it's important that the high school age athlete is working between sets of 8 and 12 at least 2/3 of the time on major lifts and, pretty much all the time on the supplementary lifts. I think kids can go too heavy. And I think that, like I said, I take the idea that I want to get my kids, bigger, stronger, change in body composition. And I think that's more effective there than it is if I'm, having to do a lot of singles or 3s or 5s or whatever.
Absolutely. That's great stuff. So, Coach, is there a situation, maybe say it's supposed to be a 3 sets of 10 day, and that athlete comes in and on the first set can't even get 10 on that first set? Is there a situation in the day that you might decrease the load? Is there a situation if this athlete gets 10 and then 6 and 6 on his second and third set, that maybe that athlete will decrease the load for the next week? Is there ever a time when you'll decrease the load in that situation?
Well, when I instruct them on that is I said, if you're not getting close to 10, then you've got too much weight on there. And what I'd like them to do is the next workout lighten if they can get back up and come back up. But I'll also ask them on something like that. Okay, why'd you choose that weight? Is that what you've been doing previously? And then kind of, okay, is there something going on to where you're tired? Are you getting enough sleep? You eating right? The other stresses in your life. So I kind of, individualize that if a kid comes up with that problem, so that I can say, okay, well, you know what? This is probably a bad weekend. Let's give it a try next time. Or, maybe you need to build your confidence back up. Let's go down a little bit and then work our way back up.
Absolutely. I appreciate that input, Coach. The next question is from John Gurton. The question is, it's related to programming still. Has that philosophy or methodology changed over your years of experience? Has your programming changed? Is this something that maybe you learned under another coach and that's pretty much stuck with you throughout? How has it changed throughout the course of your career?
Having been in this 32 years, I keep going to conferences and keep saying things and keep, you always come back and you kind of question, okay, can I be doing this better? And there have been a few times where I've tried for 9 weeks to do something a little bit different where, I changed up the order. Went, more of a, high rep day, a little bit lower rep day, went with lower reps for a period of time on certain lifts. And when I looked at the testing results at the end, I found that it wasn't any better, and in many cases worse. My kids seemed a little bit more confused. And so the thing I've kind of taken on is that, when I have 32 years of data, and I know that the percentage increases that I can see, I know my kids don't reach plateaus. I know when my kids head to college, that they often tend to be the strongest freshmen, and sometimes they tell me that the strongest kid on the team, that, it's working. So I don't believe in change for change's sake, and I think a lot of the studies that I see are looking short term. And I think any type of thing that you do for a short period of time is going to show some change. But I don't see enough studies that say, okay, let's look at high school age kids over a 3-year span, having done this or that, and did they continue to progress? Are they continuing to improve? What does the data show that they've done in that period of time? And I can do that. So, I've had this for a while. It's worked for a while. I've tried some other things that haven't worked, just kind of piloted some things. So I like what I see.
Absolutely. Coach, these guys are making it easy on us. The questions are flowing pretty well. Now, okay. Same thing over the course of your career. In what ways has the high school athlete changed, if at all? I'm sure they have in your 32 years of experience. What ways have the high school athletes changed?
When I first started, there weren't high school strength coaches. A lot of schools didn't have weight rooms. Some people might find this interesting, but around the Indianapolis area, we were kind of pioneers. And for the first 20 years, I would say, of my career, we had a huge advantage on the schools that we played because they didn't have the rooms yet. They didn't have the strength coaches yet. They didn't have the class yet. And we'd go out into the court, and I was basically able to put out college level strength, maturity versus high school type kids. We could move kids 2 or 3 years above what their physical maturity was. So that really helped in terms of, making a huge difference in pretty much any sport. But the change that I've seen is that, especially like in my conference around the Indy area, I'm at 6,200 square foot weight room. I'm about the 7th or 8th, within a 30-mile radius. We've got a school up north that has 11,000 square feet. I mean, people realized that in order to be successful, in order to compete, they had to build bigger rooms and more kids are involved. So I've seen it go from, where it was kind of the oddity. I've seen it where, there were still some baseball coaches who maybe didn't, buy into it, or maybe a swim coach. I've seen it to where, the girls programs, where we were the only girls teams that lifted, to where now, they all do. And everybody's kind of caught on to that. As far as athletes in general, I think it's different by schools. For my school, we went from, fewer than 20% free and reduced lunch to a school that's over 80% free and reduced lunch. So it's got a different demographic. So I got a different type of kid that I'm working with. Different number of professional parents and so forth. So I've had to adjust and change how I deal with kids. But I think kids in general now understand the importance of strength and conditioning much more than they did before. I think it's a lot easier to sell. I think it's a lot easier to point to college and professional athletes that do it. So if I got a baseball player and it doesn't seem to be working hard, I can say, okay, now look at the professional leagues. They're getting caught with steroids and everything else because they understand that being stronger, being more powerful is going to make them a better baseball player. So why wouldn't you want to utilize what you've got available in order to improve yourself? So to me, over the years, I'd say that the things that's changed the most is it's become much easier. It's much more commonplace. So, that's a big thing.
Coach, you hit on an important point. That was one of the questions. So I'm not skipping the questions above it. I'm just going on to one that'll flow a little bit better. Do you have any specific strategies to encourage your female athletes? Or when that moment came, you said that maybe early on there was some slight resistance from a couple female sports. Was there something that you tried in that moment that really pushed through for you? Is there anything now that you keep up with that encourages female participation, maybe sport coach participation from those female sports?
When I first started, the girls that were in the room had a fear of looking like guys. When I first started, the girls did not want their names up on boards in the room, where it was like, everybody above 110-pound bench press or whatever. they said, oh, people will think we're Amazons. Within 2 years, it was just the opposite. Once we got going, the girls said, how come we don't have as many boards as the guys? Within a few years, I was constantly getting pictures of girls at prom flexing. And as society has changed about, the female physique, I think it's helped tremendously where, I don't get that anymore where the girls are saying, I'm afraid I'm going to look too big, I'm going to look too strong. We're covered with mirrors in our room, and I still got girls flexing and, look at this and that and so forth. So I think as society's changed, it's become much easier. I do talk to, I get the opportunity to talk with a lot of schools. I've had over 350 visit my school, and I've been paid by about 40 schools to come in and do consultations to entire athletic, programs. So I do realize that out there's some that are still going through what I went through 32 years ago, where they haven't convinced all the females to lift. There are still the parents at home, I'm afraid my daughter's going to look like a guy and so forth. But I think a lot of that is it's an education process. Early on, I put information out there that said, hey, you don't have the hormones guys do. You're not going to be, building up like they do. I explained that our program is really a 4-day split routine, which means you're lifting twice a week in each part of your body. It's only 35 minutes. There's about 7.5 minutes of workload. I'm not going to be able to change your body composition dramatically in that, without, you taking some type of testosterone. So once you kind of educate them a little bit and show them that, hey, and by lifting, you're going to be able to eat more and still not gain weight. If I, make you leaner, it's going to improve your metabolism. Some of these things they like to hear to know, okay, this isn't going to be a negative. In addition, if they're an athlete and they're a serious athlete, I talk about the gains that they're going to make performance-wise and so forth. And a lot of them buy into that too. It's like, I want to be the best athlete I can be. I want to reduce injury. It's really only what I would call the recreational type athlete that still wears a uniform in our school that I think, falls into the, worrying about that type of thing.
Is every athlete suggested to take your class? Is it mandated by the school? How is that set up for the athletes and taking your class?
I'm very fortunate that I feel like I have the ideal situation. What I do is I get a roster from all 20 sport coaches, and I put it on a spreadsheet. I assign them a period based on what sport they're in, and I send that down to the counseling office. So the counseling office can only put people in my class if they're on my list. So if a kid has never played a sport before, they can't just say, okay, I want to get in. We have the after school available to that type of student. A general student who's not an athlete, we have a fitness and conditioning class that we put them in, which, teaches them basic body composition and so forth, where, it looks more like from a health club standpoint as opposed to from an athletic standpoint. That way, the atmosphere in the class is one where, these are all athletes. So it's a lot easier to discipline them to the idea that, this is what we're trying to accomplish in here. I really don't have discipline issues. I don't have, it makes it much easier to motivate. It's just, again, it's the ideal situation. Now, I know some, required to have any student who wants to enroll. And what I tell those people when I'm working with them is that make your class tough enough to where you only get those really serious kids, and if you do, then it's not going to bring you down. You don't want to turn the class into, a dumping ground the counseling office has. And I think a lot of that is, the things you have to go through with administration to convince them that this is what's best for our school. And that's, if we don't have control of it from the administrative level down, then we're not going to be able to do it right. And if we don't do it right, we're going to miss out on some things.
Sure. Coach, the next subject, next topic, quite a few questions are asking. We started talking about monitoring strength levels at least. Do you have any movement screening process or system that you follow, or is it something that you kind of use visually, kind of check and see? And then you mentioned correctives a little bit on those movement days. Is there a movement screen you use?
I saw Gray Cook, I think when he first kind of came out. I was able to see him in person and ask him some questions. And, the athletic trainer and I, went and saw the, functional movement screen in process and, the scoring system and all that. And I came back and he and I talked, my trainer and I, we said, you know what, I'm not sure we can get 15 minutes per kid to test them. I'm not sure without us having tested before that the 3-2-1 is really going to be, are we going to be able to define 2.5, 3? And what is that going to tell us and how is that going to help us? So what I came back from there with is, okay, I've got to make sure that my program has, fixes, correctives, whatever you want to call them, within the program. So, I started going to where we, added a single leg deadlift with kettlebells. I felt like, I'm working on some things here. We've gone to a single leg squat off of a box where they're working on balance and coordination. I'm trying to get, rid of some of that, always having 2 feet on the ground. On the Wednesday athletic enhancement day, we start passing medicine balls where they're just on one leg, the other leg up at 90 degrees. We passed from a lunge position, with a rotation. We added some, type of core stabilization and so forth. I have the kids get into a deep squat position, holding a medicine ball out in front, and then going back down with the medicine ball overhead. So what I've tried to do is make both my combination of my lifting program, my athletic enhancement program, where it is working on things that correct imbalances just within the program. So within that, it's pretty easy for me when kids are doing lunge walks or whatever it is to say to a kid, you've got some issues with this. These are some things, that would be helpful. And, you can even point it out to a group all at once. I mean, when they're all down and everybody's got a medicine ball holding out in front of them and they're down, and you say, hey, if your heels are coming up, this is what's going on. If you're, bending forward at the waist, this is what's going on. And I have them work in pairs where a kid will actually pull them back. So, I don't do, individualized, with every single kid functional movement screen, but I incorporate that into a program in a way that I feel like you can when you're working with so many athletes at once, and in a way that, high school kids aren't going to necessarily go out and do stuff on their own. So I've got to make sure that I'm hitting that with all of them at some point during the day.
Excellent. Now, Coach, a lot of your language might be confusing or might be foreign to sport coaches. Maybe as far as not necessarily just talking about movement assessments, but as far as how do you quantify your ability and your success and your job as the strength and conditioning professional on campus to sport coaches? Is it numbers? Do you maintain or monitor your injury rate? What's that communication like with sport coaches?
Well, to get sport coaches on board, initially it was one of these things where every article that I could pick up that had to do with that particular sport and the benefits of lifting, I would send their way. So, I was constantly, searching throughout the literature to find things that said why a cross-country runner should still be lifting heavy or things like that I felt like if I could educate my coaching staff and get everybody on board, then, I could go with this unified approach and get people to understand the benefits. It helped also initially when I had a core group of kids who were multiple sport athletes that, they played football, they lifted hard, and they went to baseball season, and those were the most powerful hitters. They'd improved their throwing strength. There were a lot of things that kind of helped educate my coaches through just the progression that we went through and getting the class started and getting the kids lifting. So that helped. Now, as new coaches come in, and you can imagine over 32 years, I've had new ADs, new coaches, new principals. I feel like I have to educate them. So I get a new coach in, I'll bring them in and say, this is why we do what we do. Need you to support it. This is how it's going to help your program. This is how it's not going to hurt. The kids are lifting on the days of competition and so forth. This is what we've done in the past. But, when you've been at it this long, you've also got a lot of things you can show them. You can show them the data in terms of, I'm going to give you a kid who, as a male, within 2 years, they're going to be benching 90 to 100 pounds more than when I started with them. They're going to be squatting 130 to 150 pounds. They're going to be cleaning 70 to 80 pounds more. I'm going to improve their vertical jump by 3 to 4 inches. Their 40 times going to come down 3 to 4 tenths of a second. So I'm going to give you a different animal than you started with, so that's going to help in there. And, if there's other sports that don't require that kind of thing, I'll explain to the cross-country coach how that kid can, be better on hills, better start, better kick, a number of things that are going to benefit them. But I can also, when we went from, things like football, we're in 47 years of football prior to the strength program, we'd only had 11 years of 500 or better. And in the last 30 years, we've averaged over 10 wins a year. We've won the state 8 times. Nice. We've been national champions at one point. So by being successful in a lot of different sports, both male and female, I think, once you get to that point, it becomes even easier.
Absolutely. Now, Coach, have you had any coaches that have hesitated to buy in, or any coaches in your many years of experience that maybe wanted to train their own team?
I haven't had any that wanted to train their own team. But I have had ones that, have not been as supportive as others and pushing the kids to get in the class. I have some sports that have 100% attendance in the class. Every single kid's in it. Where I have some that I would say it's more like the kids that are in it because they know, they've heard about it, they've seen success, as opposed to that coach kind of saying, hey, look at your schedule. There's, you can fit it in if you want to. Or, I had a really good basketball coach for an extended period of time with the girls who, he'd basically say, if you're not signed up for the class, count on coming in before school with me, lifting 4 days a week. Things like that encourage kids to be a part of it. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Now, Coach, this is a question from Gary Schofield, who I want to thank for helping set this up. He was wondering, in your unified approach, in season and out of season, and you touched on it a little bit, but I want you, if you could, go in a little bit of greater detail what it's going to look like for an athlete that is. It sounds like some of your classes might have different teams in them, right? Because you said you have 7 periods, is that right? And
7 period day, 6 periods of class of the kids in class, yeah.
So what might that look like from a unified approach, having in-season athletes, having out-of-season athletes in that same program?
What I have found is that with the high school age athletes, that I do not need to dial down in season, and that with the length of season, the number of games that they play, if I was constantly, telling that kid to taper off and not do as much and take it easy, that they would not gain throughout the time that I've been there. I'm also able to show them that they can do a workout in the morning, or during school, and still go out and practice hard, a couple hours, and not think anything of it, so that they could also do that in competition. I feel like by keeping our kids on that similar routine, that they actually gain more confidence. I've convinced our kids that, lifting throughout is going to make you feel stronger and so forth. Our football coach, when we went to state championship the year before this, was a day that we didn't have school. He still brought them in and lifted upper body on game day because he knew that was what they were used to, and they were sold on it. So, I have shown, throughout the years that you don't have to back off with a high school age kid. They recover quickly. I hear a lot of people worry about, recovery with this age group, but, if you look at my program too, it's 5 stations, 3 sets per, and if you really break it down, it's about 7.5 minutes worth of work. I'm not one that does any more than 3 sets on bench, squat, or clean, and I've been able to show a lot of success later on when we do, testing with that. So I don't feel like there's a need for more. But by doing that, I'm not tearing them down so much that they can't walk out of the room, but enough to where they gain strength, they gain confidence, and all these things I'm trying to get. So there's no change at all in my system, in season, out of season. The kids are on the same program.
Coach, this is another question from me. Just, you got my mind rolling. In those 7.5 minutes that you have at a station, are the athletes expected to warm up with a certain load prior to that? Because those 3 sets are working sets, correct? So should they be warm enough? Should they be warm from your general warm up that you'll go through early on, or do you expect them to get?
Here's another one. It's kind of against the textbook. If I had the luxury of a longer class period, I'd take all the kids out and we do a dynamic warm up routine, and before we head in the room. But I don't have that luxury. I've got to decide. Do I want to spend 10, 15 minutes on warm-up and very little time under the bar, or can I find a way to get them warmed up enough to where they are not going to get injured, they can still lift, with intensity? And what I have found is that by going through 2 to 3 minutes of simulated jumping rope, where I get their heart rate going, blood flow, they work up a little bit of a sweat, and then I have the kids that are on upper body do push-ups, the kids that are on lower body do air squats, and my air squat is them putting their hands behind their head, getting down, below parallel if they can, keeping their chest up. By just doing that 15 together, and my kids say that's the hardest 15 push-ups ever because they go on my down count. It's not like them doing it just on their own, so it takes a little bit longer. But when they get done with that, they can put the weight on the bar and they can go. Now, yeah, it doesn't sound like it should be. Everything you read about, warm-up sets and everything else. But my kids have always done that. They are able to go. And I think part of it is that I'm not starting them off with singles or, threes or whatever, because they tend to be up there around 8, 10, 12 and so forth, that it's never been a problem. By the time they work down to where we're doing 6, 4, 2, it's still not an issue yet. So, I think that you gotta look at the science, you gotta read the textbook, but I think you also gotta understand that a lot of that comes about as a result of watching people, in their workouts and them doing things and then adjusting to what works and, what people can do. My kids are still able to lift a lot of weight. My kids are still able to, get the sets in without an extensive warm-up prior. And the nice thing about this, too, is when I have 5 stations, and I've got 5 pieces of equipment, which either the 5 stations, there's really only one group that's starting on squat or one group that's starting on bench. So some of them are starting with a different lift that may not be as intensive. So, it's really only that first group, and they're the ones coming right off of the warm-up that we do together. So it works.
How do you determine which groups start where? Is there a certain group that's going to start with your primary lifts?
What I do is everything, to me in high school, everything's got to be mapped out ahead of time. You can never just walk in the room and say, you go here, you go there, and you can have something written on the board. I believe in structure. It's the same thing in a classroom with high school students. If you leave them to their own for a second, they'll find something, to get in trouble with. So when my kids walk in, they've got a workout card. On that workout card, which is color-coded, there are 5 different colors. Each color has a different exercise with a number 1 next to it. So they're all numbered. So the 8 kids who are with a white card are all going to start at bench the first week of the 9 weeks. So it all says 1, and then number 2 lift is right after it. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Another 8 kids will be starting on the second station on their card, whereas another 8 kids will start in the third. So each color is numbered different and has a different sequence. So when they walk in the room, they look at what our starting station is for the week. They know where to start. So nobody ever starts more than 1 week at a particular lift. So each week it changes. And even that, I think, again, it goes away from the textbook. If you had a different setup, somebody might be saying, well, we got all our kids starting the bench, and then we all move them all to there because you got a lot of the multi-use racks. But for me, I like the idea of them starting with different lifts. I think that's part of the variety. Even though I'm not changing lifts a lot, I'm changing which one they start with and the order along with the set and rep and so forth. And the fact that I've got a split routine, that's been enough to get past that fact that I'm not, my kids lift the same base program that the 3 years that I have in 10th through 12th grade. It's not like we're changing lifts other than, the kids that are out of season are coming in for a second lift after school, and we do different, supplementary type things there.
Absolutely. We had a question that came up. I'm having a tough time opening it up, but is there a change at all in intensity on game day?
Not a prescribed one, where I say, okay, it's game day, back off. But, I'm not naive enough to think that there aren't kids that say, I gotta lift, I gotta match, meet, whatever it is today. I'm not going as hard. And I think some of that is even just a personality thing. I've got some kids who will say it's game day and they get pumped up and they need to, blow off some steam. And so they really hit it as hard as they do any other day. And I've got some other kids who, are always that kind of kid that's always worried about getting hurt or always worried about being too tired or whatever, that is going to back off on their own. I don't allow them to only do like 1 set or 2 sets. They still got to go through the routine. They got to go through the rotation, but it's kind of a personalized, thing where if that kid on his own is deciding to, back off a little bit where, it's not so much so that I'm saying, hey, what are you doing? Just using a bar or whatever it is. I let them kind of monitor that.
Sure. Sounds good. Now, Coach, I hear a lot of, and in the emails that you sent me, I hear it in your voice. I see it in the emails. There's a great wealth of what sounds like some sports psychology knowledge. The next question came from Kyle. What type of goal setting do you have the kids either complete, or what do you work on with them? It sounds like sort of your system sets up a goal setting approach in itself of trying to attain and beat those 3 sets of 10. But what's some approaches you have as far as goal setting?
Well, I'm really big on teaching kids how to set goals and them understanding that you set a goal and that's the outcome, but you've got to focus on the process. So once you've decided that you want to get this much stronger or run that much faster, whatever it is, let's break it down and figure out what you need to do, week by week, day by day in order to make that happen. Yeah, that kind of brings me into, I really feel like what I'm doing, the part about just the weights, the workouts and so forth is just becomes a smaller and smaller portion of what I think this job entails. I really think as a strength coach, you've got to be a sports psychologist. You've got to be a motivator. You've got to be a mentor. You've got to be a counselor. You've got to, study psychology yourself, but also study, this age group and study how it relates to sport, because you are their best resource for that. You're not the guy deciding whether they play or not. In some situations, I know you've got sport coaches there in the room, but I really think that I need to be able to get inside their head. I need to know how to motivate them and all those things. So when it comes to goal setting, we do a lot of different things. Now, I know in talking to Gary Schofield, he's, we joke around about this all the time, but he's not into record boards. I'm into record boards. I mean, I'm into the idea that with a high school age athlete, they're going to try to see how much they can lift, whether you want them to or not. I mean, there's not a kid out there that isn't going to want to max out at some point. And if you're not letting him, he's going to go do it in his garage on his own. But if I do it once every 9 weeks, so only 4 times per year with a coach's supervision, and I, cycle down to it, I feel like it's done in a healthy way, but it's also done in a way where I can get kids to measure improvement. I can get kids to set goals, and they can also, along the way, kind of set, day-to-day process type things where they say, okay, if I do this and I get there. So, I mean, I really think goal setting is important. And we do things like, have top 5 boards for, per weight class. I've got girls that are based on a percentage of body weight. I've got different clubs that are up there. With our football team, I'll put in pencil kids who should be in a club. By the time the season starts, when they make the club, we put it in marker. We keep track of the totals there. With our football program, we've got position coaches now who actually put up goals for each of the kids within their position, where they say, this is where you were, this is where you should be. So it's goals about the bench squat clean, the vertical jump, the 40, the things we test, how much body weight change they want to make. So they understand that, this day-to-day process is necessary in order to reach there, but it's going to have to be on a consistent basis. So, we break it down for them and understand that, so they understand the whole goal process, as opposed to, just one of those kids, I want to bench 300 someday, and, but you don't give them the tools necessary to understand how he needs to get there.
Right. Coach, switching gears a little bit. What are some of the best strategies to make a push for either more, whether it be speak to athletic directors about creating positions, maybe it's a young guy that's looking for a position, maybe it's an experienced guy like yourself approaching athletic directors, coaches about creating those positions. Maybe it's just word of mouth, like what has kind of happened in your area, it sounds like. What are some suggestions, maybe to the gamut of coaches and professionals, of how these positions can get started?
Well, first off, email me and I could send you. I've written an article that's going to be published in Athletic Management, which is a magazine for athletic directors that covers, a lot of this. How do you convince an athletic director? What are the steps to take, and so forth. I've also got a document that I used with another school in the area that was, how do you create a strength coach position? I've got another presentation on the whole, convincing an athletic staff on the unified concept. So, if you haven't already done so, email me and I can send you those things. But I really think that, when I've gone to these schools, I feel like it's like selling water in the desert. I mean, it's easy sell, because if you can go in and you say, this is the most important thing you can do for your athletic program. It's not the uniforms, it's not the facility size, it's somewhat the coaches, but if the coaches don't have the athletes, they're not going to be able to, no matter how good they are, they're not going to be able to win. You can talk about how, improved athletic performance helps community spirit, young kids getting into athletics. I mean, all these things that we're trying to get, but, teams need to be successful, and you have to give them every resource and every advantage. And if we don't have a strength coach, if we don't have, somebody that knows what they're doing in the weight room, we're not going to allow our kids to be as good as they could be. And we're going to be more liable if there are injuries, that occur. We're not going to have that expert that people look to. We're missing out. I mean, it's kind of like not having a certified athletic trainer on staff, to deal with injuries. We've I think we're about 15, 20 years behind athletic training, but I think we can, in some ways, look to that and kind of use that and say, you know what, you don't have, sport teams go out without athletic trainers. You don't have kids go into a pool without, a certified person in charge. There's a lot of things that we already do within an educational system that we need to make sure we carry over to strength and conditioning. But I think you got to figure out who pushes the buttons in your district. Sometimes it's the superintendent, sometimes it's the principal, sometimes it's the AD. And you got to keep, climbing up the chain and figuring out which one you need to convince that this is a key component of our athletic, department.
Sure. Awesome. Good stuff. Coach, and I know the power clean is one of your big 3. What are your thoughts on Olympic weightlifting movements and variations for high school athletes? Maybe in comparison to more elite caliber of athletes, maybe in comparison to college athletes. What are your thoughts? What are some of the, just take us through some of your beliefs, and then maybe universally at the high school level?
Well, I don't think you should ever look at a college program to determine your program, because we're working with different athletes. College level athlete already has a base of strength and a level of physical maturity and chronological age that is different from what we're working with. So I think what you do, and when you look at college programs, you maybe find a drill here and there, or you maybe look at a certain concept, or you say, okay, in order for me to get a kid to that point, this is what I need to do. But I don't think you ever take their programs. Sure. I think what you've got to realize is that you're working with a level of athlete, that is much different than what they are. So when it comes to Olympic lifts, I think a clean, and we do a hang clean for 2/3 of the time, and from the floor for the last third, I think is good in teaching the kids a triple extension. Now, if I didn't know how to teach clean and didn't feel comfortable teaching clean and didn't need to use that as a testing point, motivational boards and so forth, I think if you taught a kid how to hang on to a couple dumbbells to his side and extend up and jump as high as they could and how to land, I think you could get a lot of what we're getting out of clean, just not with as heavy a weight maybe. And so, not, maybe the same thing, but pretty much. I mean, I feel like any program ought to have some type of triple extension in it. We get that with a clean. We get that with doing some plyometric jumps on Wednesdays. But if you don't feel comfortable teaching the clean, don't teach the clean. It's a complicated enough lift for a beginner or somebody that is not familiar with it that, if things can go wrong if not taught correctly. I mean, kids bending over too much, hips coming up too high, things like that, that if you don't know how to look for it and you don't feel comfortable with it, don't use it. But I think it's important that you have some type of triple extension in your program. Now, do I feel it's necessary for me to teach my kids a snatch? No. I mean, I feel like I'm getting what I need out of the clean. Do I feel like it's important for me to have 5 different variations of it? No, because then I'll have to teach that many kids there's that many opportunities for them to have problems with technique. They also are going to have to figure out what weights to use on the different lifts that we have. We're going to go through a lot of reteaching. So you'll see a lot of repetition kind of within what I do, but in part it's because I have such a limited time that I don't want to have continuous times that I'm reteaching things, showing new things, kids figuring out what weight to use, and not totally utilizing the time that I have available to them.
Sure. Is there a specific progression you'll go through with the hang clean, or does an athlete come in day one?
When I teach the hang clean, what I first do is I teach a kid how to lift the bar up off the ground. Okay, once they've done that and they're standing up with the bar, I teach them how to bend, kind of hinge and jump, just holding the bar straight down. Once they can do that, then I teach them a high pull. And once they can do a high pull, they're keeping the bar close to their body, I teach them how to catch it. Now, I'm different from USA weightlifting guys. My feeling is that if, and some people, rake me over the coals for this, but I feel like that the reason I do that lift is because I'm looking at kids extending through the ankle, knee, and the hip. I'm not looking at it in terms of I want to make Olympic lifters out of my athletes. And really I tell them, we measure strength and we do 1 rep and so forth, but that's just a byproduct of what we're doing as opposed to the main focus. So when it comes to Olympic lifts, I do not like the catch in the low squat position with a high school age athlete for a couple reasons. One is I feel like some of them, have some potential knee injuries where if they drop down with heavy weight, we could see some issues. I also don't like the fact that I see many times when people teach, the Olympic clean, that a kid doesn't drive the bar as high. And I want to focus on extending up as opposed to a kid that learns how to take it to about waist or just above and then a forceful drop under. So, my clean is it's catching kind of a, what you might call a quarter or half squat, where it's just a basic athletic position when they catch, as opposed to a deep drop. So for me, it's teaching them how to catch it, keep the elbows under, not putting a lot of pressure on the wrist. But the important part of that lift is the explosion up, as opposed to me, even the catch at the top, or some of these other factors that I think are more about the lift than they are about making athletes. So I want to keep my kids safe and I want them to do things the right way, but I don't want to turn them into necessarily Olympic lifters. I want to turn them into athletes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Coach. This question's coming from me again. I want to talk about multiple sport athletes. It sounds like this is one of the things that you really push on campus, or you feel like is a major part of your role as the professional on campus. What percentage of high schools at Ben Davis are multiple sport? Is there a huge, Have you seen a drop off? Maybe that's part of something that you've seen in a change in athletes. Has there been a significant increase in a couple years as part of your doing? What do you see in terms of trends? What do you think we can do to encourage, if you think that's something that we should do, is encourage multiple sport athletes?
Well, I think, one of my big arguments for a unified concept is the fact that it encourages multi-sport participation.
Sure.
Within a lot of schools that I talk to, and if you got the football coach that wants kids lifting year round, but you got a baseball coach that doesn't want to lift as much or wants to back them off or whatever it is, those coaches aren't as likely to say, hey, go do this in the spring, because they're going to say they're going to lose out because they're not really getting at least the base lifting program in. So by having all of your kids on the same program, and all coaches know that they're all getting this base regardless of how many sports they participate in, I think it's a lot easier for coaches to encourage it. And I really think they should. And I think it's really easier on the kids too, because it's not like I have to decide, okay, do I want to lift in the spring or do I want to run track? So, I think that the program itself lends itself to multi-sport participation. Now, has it changed over the years? Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of, club volleyball, AAU basketball, et cetera, that, baseball year round, that have kind of pulled kids to specialize, which I don't think is good. And I think we're seeing a lot more overuse injuries because kids are specializing, the year round. But we're also seeing a lesser athlete with, back in the day, in the way long ago when I was younger, kids went outside and they played wiffle ball. They played pickup, kind of activities where if you didn't have enough room and you were playing in the, the distance between the sidewalk and the road, you played there and you played on your knees. And you did different things where you were developing different movement skills. Our kids don't get that now. So, I think that reinforces what I've got to do in terms of developing general athleticism and general strength to kind of get away from the fact that this kid is so specialized sometimes coming into me that, he's only worked rotationally in one direction because he's, hits a golf ball, hits a baseball one way, or throws with one arm. So, yeah, I've seen some change, but I think our school, even though it's a large school, we've got an awful lot of kids that are dual sport athletes. I think within the female population, I'm more likely to get 3-sport athletes. But what I've seen, I guess, is fewer males that go, year round with 3 different ones. Most of them tend to go 2.
Excellent. Coach, you have there's it's somewhat of a culture at my schools, at my school, and I think probably a lot of coaches at private schools share the same concern that often we have. It's not necessarily always a concern, but sometimes and often parents here are looking for like private trainers. They don't understand that although our salary is paid by their tuition, they feel as though they're not paying for it. They feel as though if they don't have to pay for something, it must not be that good. Do you have any parents like that at your school? You told me how many students are on free or reduced lunch, so that might not be an issue. But do you see any of that? How do you deal with that? Do you communicate with that facility? Do you just encourage them not to go? What are some of your thoughts as far as that goes?
Well, that's where it helps, having less money to be thrown around by the parents. But, I still see some of the same issues. I know when I talk to these guys that teach at really high level private schools that have parents who, anything that money can buy, I want to get for my kid. But I think that's part of the education process. In parent meetings, I'm explaining what we accomplish here, show kids what we do. But it's also if a parent comes to me, if a kid comes to me and say, I want to do this, in addition, I'll talk to them about, okay, when you go to this place, are they going to understand that you're lifting 2 days upper, 2 days lower, or are they going to have you lift on lower on the same day you did upper, where it's in conflict with what you're already doing? So, to me, the only one that I would ever encourage is if I've got, a situation like, a kid's already going through our program, but feels like on the weekend he might want to have one day where he goes to a performance center and they work on some basic agility skills or something that complements what we do as opposed to take away from what we do. So, I get, a little bit of that, but mostly I think because we've been so successful, because their kids see so much change in the program that we've got, that they don't feel as much of a need. We just tested 40s, I know somebody's probably going to argue why you still run 40s, and I could give you a 5 to 10 minute answer on that, but we run 40s, and, I've got 5 kids that are within the 4.3s. I've got 22 kids that are, below 4.6, so in the 4.5s or so forth. So I can show that my kids are getting faster just by going through what we're going through, and that, the need to go out and do some extra stuff isn't necessarily going to help and could possibly hurt.
I think this next question, and that's great stuff, Coach. This next question, I think it carries on with the same point of maybe communication with parents, especially in the high school level athlete, high school age of athlete. Do you have any sort of education? Do you educate them in any way as far as nutrition goes? Is there any communication with the parents? And is there a way that you monitor their nutrition and their dietary intake? Is there a way that you monitor their recovery, whether it be nutrition-based, whether it be sleep, whether it be some other form of monitoring?
Well, I was sitting down with Gary Schofield, and he was showing me a great program online about where he measures the amount of sleep kids get and the amount of water that they're drinking, and that they've got a score for that each day. And I explained to him that, in my type of kid, I couldn't get him to fill it out. And the only way I'm going to tell how much sleep kids get is if I look on their Twitter account and see what time they sign off. So I'm working with a different animal than some other people are. Same thing with nutrition. With me, I cannot give detailed nutrition advice. It's got to be kind of individualized. Where I talk to a kid will come to me and say, I want to lose weight or I want to gain weight. And I'll say, okay, what's your situation? And in most cases, we're a universal free breakfast school. So every single kid that's in my school gets free breakfast. 80% are getting free lunch. So the choices they have are fairly limited. But what I say to them is, these are the best choices from what you have available there. We actually offer free dinner too to our kids. So they don't have as many options to get out there, but I've just got to educate them on what the best options within the framework that they have. I also, it's about teaching them about, okay, if you got to go fast food, which, parents don't have any money, but they give them, a few bucks for going out to a fast food place for dinner. I let them know what I think their best choices are. We talk about recovery nutrition, Gatorade, thing with a performance kit that you get where you can get like 120 bars and 120 drinks for about $135, allows me at about 60 cents a piece to have available to kids, 20 grams of whey protein that they can, what I do is I sell it to them for $1 as kids say they don't carry change. And it allows me enough to where I can give out, bars and drinks as rewards. I can, give certain kids and I don't have any money for free, and then that way I break even. But it allows me an opportunity to kind of supplement what they can already do, with that. So, throwing Gatorade in here, but Gatorade's been a great sponsor to the NSCA high school coaches. They're doing, all-day tracks at the conferences, and they're really wanting to do some special things. So it's that's part of it. But the other thing I've seen is that they've got a palatable, protein bar and drink that my kids will eat. Whereas, a lot of times some of these things, it's all about whether it tastes good or not. So for me, the bottom line is it's got to be individualized. I do talk to some parents. Parents will ask me, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I can get some parents on board. But, I could not get my high school kids to fill out a nutrition log, where they're showing me what they eat on a daily basis. So it's got to be more about an education process, knowing what the limitations are, to giving them more generalities and, stay away from the fried foods, not too much sugar. Let's make sure we're not drinking pop where you're getting a lot of sugar in liquids, things like that. They're the basics, as opposed to, what percentage of carbohydrates they're eating during the day, because they ain't going to go anywhere with them.
Coach, at your public school, I doubt do you have any communication with the dining staff? Do they have any leeway to be able to alter what they provide to the students, whether free or even something that they're going to pay for?
Not at all. Okay. And, we've put things in like, okay, one of the options kids have in the morning is Pop-Tarts, and we're saying, how does that meet federal guidelines for nutrition? And they come in with, there's a fruit jelly in the inside or something that covers something, so the federal guidelines for what is acceptable, are not very good in my opinion. And, one of the things that, our nutrition people will say within our school is, we can't have just strictly nutritious offerings because we'll lose money. Kids won't, the other kids won't buy anything. We won't be able to show the government that we're, feeding this many kids because they just don't take it. So, plus they've got a certain amount of money to work with per kid. So they feel like, their hands are tied and they're doing the best they can within that situation. But, I don't have any input as to what our high school puts out.
Sure. Cool. Keeping with the recovery thought or recovery topic, is there something that you and your athletic trainer, is there a specific communication y'all have? For one, Secondly, is there a thought process you have for the injured athletes that are in your system, whether it be helping them recover or maybe some modifications or some alterations around their injury?
Yeah, I'm fortunate that I have two certified trainers on our staff. One is a full-time teacher. The other comes in, still works 40 hours a week, but is an after-school provider for us through a hospital. We also have a team doctor that's provided by the hospital, comes in once a week. So my kids can head to the trainer, and my trainers know what our program is. So we're in constant contact. So the kid goes there, and they bring a note back to me that says, this is what's going on. This is what I'm restricting them from. They're okay to do this. Or they're restricted from this, but anything else that you've got, go ahead with. So we're working with them in terms of what they can and can't do. And, I'll make the adjustments within the class in the time that I've got them, but then we also have a training room available after school, every single day where they go in and do some, more specific rehab type thing, bands and so forth, and some of the equipment that I may not necessarily have in the weight room that they can do in the training room.
Good stuff. Thank you, Coach. What about advice for, in particular, speaking about your unified approach, do you have advice for coaches that don't teach a class, that don't have that class period? Maybe they have to train athletes before and after school, or maybe they're not the traditional certified teacher on campus. Do you have any advice as far as those after or before school protocols?
Well, the program that I've got is basic enough to where, like I said, I've been able to put it in all kinds of different schools. And really, the first year I was at Ben Davis, I was a strength coach after school, Saturdays all summer, but they didn't have a teaching opening. So I did actually teach elementary school and then kind of provide a program that they could use. So I know this program could run without a certified strength coach. I mean, I've set it up in a way to where, when people come and visit me, they say, it's almost like you've got trained rats. It's like they know what to do, they know where to go. They're working harder. People are not, really off task, because it's, the structure of it is such that, I could give it to a non-certified person or somebody who didn't completely understand the science behind it, and they could still run it and be very effective with it. For somebody who does not have a class, besides, arguing for a class and keep pushing those buttons constantly, there are things like, a directed study hall. There are things like zero period. There are things like running the after-school program the same way you would a class that I think would work, just as well or close to as well. So where if I didn't have the opportunity to see my kids during the school day, what I would do is run at least one time before school where it's a 35-minute routine where those kids that are maybe in season or practicing or after school, they come in there then. After school, I'd run different sessions of that same thing where I'd say, okay, however many kids I can fit in the room at once, these kids sign up for the, school gets out at 3. These are the 3:10 to, 3:45 kids. And then I've got another session coming in where we run it just like a class. Because if you have just an open weight room, you put a workout on the board, kids will go to the lifts they want to go to. The bigger kids will monopolize the bench. The kids that, don't listen real well will go from bench to bicep curl and then leave the room. So I think if you run it structured in the same way you would for a class, no matter when you have it, I think you get the most out of the kids. And it's just a matter of figuring out, the transportation issues of some kids, which kids have to come in when. But I would run the after-school program the same way I run the class if I didn't have the class opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you, Coach. This is coming up on the last question offered anyway. Oh, we got another one. I'll leave it open for maybe 3 to 5 more questions and see what pops up, just so you guys that are viewing know that's the plan. We'll go 3 to 5 more. Hopefully you guys can pop in with a few questions. Is that cool with you, Coach?
Yeah, I'm here as long as you need me. So if they still got questions, I'm fine.
Awesome. And I think you brought up a really good point with the 0 hour in that last answer, because I know on the Facebook group that was something that was discussed pretty heavily in a recent feed. So you guys, I'll plug that high school page. It's NSCA High School Coaches. You can go ahead and join, and one of the host members or board members will be able to accept you. This is another question from me. What's your plan for the future? What's the plan for the school? Do you have any big aspirations, any changes, maybe any new things that you want to add to the school? Is there maybe that is in line with some assistants that you have or don't have or aren't interested in having? Anything along those lines for the future?
Well, for me, I've been in it 32 years. I'm 57 years old, but I feel like I could go at least 9 more. So, I mean, I'm planning on being at the high school I'm at for 9 more years. I mean, I could give you a 10, 15-minute speech on why I think the high school age, you know, working with high school strength coaching is much better than any other level. You know, I don't talk to any college guy that's been in the same place for any length of time, and you look at, you know, how many times they live out of boxes, and, you know, the hours, and not be able to have a family, and all these other things that go into that position, the hiring and the firing. I mean, the high school is the ideal age to where you get to mentor, counsel, work with a kid in terms of making some life decisions, have an impact on kids every single day. There isn't a day you don't walk home and say, you know, I made a difference today. So to me, I mean, I'm at the high school forever. As far as our school, you know, we don't have a lot of money that's going to be pumped into it. I'm not going to be able to change much equipment. You know, I fight for everything I get. You know, we went through a major renovation where I got a pretty good sized room, but, you know, we've had pretty much that same room for 16 years. And I don't see it changing a whole lot within the next, you know, 9, 10 years that I'm there. So, you know, I'll have to work with the equipment I've got. As far as assistants go, I mean, I think it would be ideal to have, you know, an assistant strength coach. I mean, I have an intern right now from a college, and it's awesome. I mean, it's making my job much easier. He takes care of some of the things that allow me to, you know, do some other things that I can't do because on a regular basis, because I'm having to take care of some of, you know, the little things that go with the job. But I'm fortunate in that my football coach is really big into what we do. And at our school, the head football coach, head basketball coach get to be in my class for a certain number of periods. We've worked the football coach up to 4, and I'm working on getting them in 5 periods because, you know, he loves everything we do, and he encourages all athletes regardless of what sport they're in. You know, basketball coach is in for a couple of periods. So even though I've got as many as 86 kids in a class, I tend to have at least one if I've got, you know, maybe 50 or 60 kids, but in most cases 2 if I've got more than that, other coaches that are in my class with me. And I think that's a tremendous help to have, you know, more adult supervision.
Absolutely.
So, you know, for me, I don't see a whole lot changing. In fact, when kids coming back and ask how things are going, I mean, most of the time I say, you know, you can come back 10 years from now, I'm probably going to give you the same answer. But I'm constantly trying to tweak my program. I mean, I'm looking at different things. I mean, you know, I just got in a discussion with Gary and Fred Eves, and, you know, showing them some of the different things that changed for me, you know, over the years, where I'll, you know, a certain lift, you know, I add or change, or a certain thing on Wednesday I'll add or change, or, you know, some different things I'll do with preseason conditioning for football or for basketball or girls basketball or whatever it is, or for some of the additional lifts that we do after school. So, you know, I'm constantly looking for ways to make my program better, but, you know, on the horizon, I'm not seeing a whole lot of things that I look to say, boy, I'm just really fighting for this, and I need to have this in order for it to be successful.
So you said that golden number was 9. Maybe in that year that you retire, or 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, what do you see taking shape in the high school world as far as strength and conditioning goes? How do you see it going?
Well, I mean, I sure hope that it continues to move forward to where, I mean, every single high school has got a strength coach, and every single high school is teaching a strength class. I mean, I think physical education, I don't want to see it fall by the wayside within schools, but I think if you have it, you should not only have a general physical education class, but an advanced class, just like you do in every other academic area. You know, within the performing arts, you've got band, you've got choir, you've got all those things. Within the academics, you got advanced math and so forth. So I think you should have something within physical education like that. So I sure hope that I see, you know, more schools that have gone to the class and realize what that can do for, you know, the kids they have at the school and their athletic programs. I'd like to see, you know, more schools have a designated, you know, strength coach, where it's not just necessarily a sport coach that's in charge of the room. I mean, I think you can get by with that. I think that's okay. And if you got a guy that's willing to learn the sport as well as the field, I think you can get to a certain point. But I think when you become an expert in your field, and that's what your passion is, and that's what you're reading about, and that's what you're doing, I think you have an advantage over a guy that's also trying to learn the X's and O's and so forth. And being a neutral source, you know, I can work with all the sports without seeming like I have, you know, I'm leaning toward one sport or another. And I think kids view me differently because, you know, I'm a strength coach as opposed to I'm the football coach who teaches weight training. So, I mean, I think it can be done, and I think it's how you present yourself. And I think, you know, just if you are a sport coach, you need to make sure that you are making it known that you've studied the field, and this is how it can help any athlete that you're working with. So, I mean, I really hope that we continue to grow. I hope the NSCA gets on board with the idea of expanding, the things that are available to the high school coach. I like the fact that, we have, more of the video presentations online and more articles that people can get to a little bit easier. I still talk to the NSCA about how difficult I think the web page is, and people can't navigate it very well. And some people don't even know what SIG means or special interest group. Even when we go to conferences and we have SIG meetings, I mean, they don't necessarily promote them in a way, or somehow we haven't gotten out in a way to where we get all the people involved that are with high school. I think the Facebook page has been huge. I mean, I've been pushing for something like this, but being an old timer, I wasn't on Facebook till we started the Facebook page, just like I wasn't on Twitter till this started. But I was the one trying to get on the forums, trying to get people involved. And when you ask how many people understand that the NSCA webpage has a forum, they didn't know. So I think that within our industry, I sure hope that we have found a way of like states having, high school strength and conditioning organizations where they're all working together. You're having more state and regional conferences where we can get to a point where we can run a conference specifically for the high school coach, where we have different speakers talking about different things, and not just be a piecemeal speaker here and there, but just be a full day or two full days of guys that know what they're doing, helping the younger and people, sharing, communicating. I'm huge on the idea of let's share the knowledge we've got. Let's learn from each other. Let's not have to go through the same mistakes that somebody else went through, and let's all be better about working with high school age kids because we're sharing information. So if I haven't said it enough, email me. I've got all kinds of attachments I'll send you with everything that I do. I'm always willing to share. If you've got something you think's exciting or you're looking at what I do and say, hey, I think this would help you, man, email me back. I'm always willing to learn. And I think if you ever get to a program or a point in this where you feel like you've got all the answers, you're in trouble. You ought to retire. One of the big things I want to tell people always is there's no one best program, and no single person knows the best way to do things. And if they act like they do, and you're in a presentation, walk out and go to a different speaker because that guy doesn't know, what he doesn't know. And so you're going to be in trouble there. Again, I'm kind of rambling, but I could probably talk for another hour if you gave me the right question. So what do you got next?
It's awesome. That's actually the last question we're going to have. What I'm going to do is, because I see we still have a lot of viewers, what I'm going to do is go ahead and pause the recording, Coach. And what we'll do is we'll just kind of stay on here, see who wants to call in. I'll leave the calls open so that way we can all kind of see each other's faces and talk, whoever wants to be a part of it. I think we'll be limited to 4, but some others can hang out and view. And if you want to get in on the call, maybe we'll push someone out. Maybe I'll step out. But before I pause this, I just wanted to say thank you so much. It's an honor to be a part of this, for one, but it's an honor to have this amount of time, about an hour and a half, to chat it up with you, let alone be able to provide some of these questions that is giving you the opportunity to provide insight to. I think I saw well over 30 coaches at one point in here. So it's just phenomenal. I know I can speak for everybody that's been chatting on the side here, that they got a lot out of this. And we're truly appreciative of your time and your information that you were willing to share.
Well, if you're at conferences and you see me, even though I've got the kind of face that rests in a way that it looks like I'm unapproachable, hit me up. I've talking about this with a couple coaches recently that, I must just give an appearance of being a little bit, out there, reserved or whatever, but I love talking this and I love answering questions. I love helping people out. So email me, talk to me at conferences, whatever, in any way that I can help. And, if you got, like I said, you got questions that aren't answered, I'll be glad to try to help you answer them.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Coach. So like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and pause this. We're going to stay on the line and chat it up a little bit, whoever wants to hang out.
Okay.
Thanks, Coach. Thank you.